David Copperfield, Charles Dickens. Introduction. Elements of literature. Literature can be defined as words written in a way to convey feelings, emotions, and understanding. In general, literature can be categorized into three genres: varieties, fiction, poetry, and drama. Literature is expected not only to entertain the reader, but to enlighten as well. When discussing literature, there are some common terms that will inevitably come up, such as theme, plot, character, and narration. Let's look at each of these and some other important elements of literature within fiction. Fiction, a story that is written about imaginary characters and events. Some aspects of fiction may be true or based on real people or events, but the story is imaginary. Theme. The theme of a story is the central idea or point, usually presented in a general or universal way. A theme can be dualistic or single in nature. Some examples of dualistic themes are love/hate, free will/fate, innocence/experience, and so on. A few examples of single-natured themes are forgiveness, old age, revenge, and so on. Plot. Plot is the way incidents in a story are presented and arranged to shape the story and provide it with a direction or goal. To discuss plot doesn't simply mean to discuss what happens, but how, and very importantly, why. Some stories follow a pyramidal plot form. Within this structure, the first part is the rising action, which is made up of complications and conflict for the protagonist. The second part is the climax, which is the moment of great emotional tension in a story. This moment is usually a turning point in the story and is followed by a falling action. This falling action, also called resolution, is characterized by the resolving of tensions or ending of conflicts. Causality, an event or series of events that causes another event. Foreshadowing. This hints at or suggests a future event or development. Background explanation. Exposition. This is the background information about the characters, plot, and or setting. Conflict. The struggle between two or more forces. This is typically the struggle between the protagonist and antagonist. Suspense. Doubt or worry about future events within the story. The writer creates suspense through various means. Complication, rising action. This refers to the intensification of the conflict. Crisis, a turning point in the story where the tension of the conflict is greatest. Resolution, also known as falling action or denouement. This is the cinematic coming together and ending of the plot. Character and characterization. A character is a fictional person in a story. Characterization is the process in which a character is made to seem real to the reader. There are different types of characters and different ways in which these characters are revealed to the reader. Protagonist, the central character in a story, sometimes a hero. Heroine, typically the protagonist, is the character to which the reader feels the most empathy and interest. Antagonist, the character force or group of forces that directly conflicts with the protagonist. And antagonist may be an individual person or a group of people or non-human forces such as poverty, injustice, fear, etc. Static characters. A static character doesn't change in the course of a story. They aren't complex characters and are often stereotypes. They aren't so much individuals as they are types. Because these characters don't grow, the reader's understanding of the static character also doesn't grow. Dynamic characters. These characters undergo some sort of significant change in the course of the story. They are psychologically complex and possesses the attributes of real people. These characters are more difficult to summarize because of their complexities and inconsistencies. Minor characters. These characters often provide a way for the protagonist's character to reveal himself or herself. The minor characters aren't as developed or important as the main characters, but will usually have a secondary function within the story to eliminate the protagonist. For example, setting, mood. Setting is the physical word, the time, the place of the story. Mood refers to the feelings conveyed by the setting. This feeling is typically established to the reader through description, narration, point of view. Every story has a narrator, and the reader can only know what the narrator reveals. The point of view of the narrator determines what, when, and how the reader learns about events in the story. The choice of point of view is deliberate and greatly affects how the story is conveyed. First person. The narrator is a participating character in that story. Often this limits the information known by the reader. Third person. This perspective allows the narrator to be omniscient and also focused on the protagonist. The narrator can choose what to reveal and when to switch from one character or place to another. Because of the omniscience of the narrator, the reader accepts the authority of the narrator. The voice of the narrator can seem to be the voice of the author. Objective. The narrator is unidentified with objective storytelling. The incidents are reported without opinion or judgment or analysis of meaning. It's up to the reader to find meaning in the events described. Omniscient. The narrator is all-knowing and can tell the story from various perspectives. Editorial omniscience. The narrator evaluates a character. Neutral omniscience. The evaluation of the character is left to the reader. Limited omniscient. The narrator is all-knowing but not for every character. Style. Style consists of the verbal and linguistic techniques used by the writer. Style is often determined by the writer's use of syntax, word order, and diction, word choice. The language used can also reveal the writer's tone. Tone. The attitude of the writer toward the subject. Tone can be sympathetic, unsympathetic, judgmental, non-judgmental, ironic, and so on. Irony. Irony is the technique of saying one thing but meaning another. The irony of a story will be shown in the language used in the descriptions. It's sometimes difficult to recognize if the writer is being sincere or ironic. In these cases, only a close reading will reveal the true attitude of the writer regarding certain subject matter. Symbolism. A symbol is something in the story that stands for something else that is usually more significant or important. Motifs. Motifs are ideas, images, or literally devices that occur throughout a story that can support or shed light on the themes. Elements of drama. Drama is a genre of literature and can be classified further into tragedy and comedy, and tragic comedy, a mix from combining tragedy with humor. Drama is meant to be performed by actors on stage. Tragic plays often end with deaths death or exile or some equivalent finish, while comedies usually end with a new beginning for the character's marriage, for example. Tragic comedy, however, usually ends without a complete solution. The audience may be left with an unsettled feeling because of the extremely complex nature of the story. Dialogue. This is the verbal exchange between characters in a play, making the characters realistic to the audience. Dialogue can reveal the emotions, opinions, and thoughts of a character directly to the viewer. Introduction, also called exposition. As in fiction, the exposition exposes the past events that have brought the characters to the situation that is occurring at the play's beginning. Not all plays provide an exposition, but many tragedies introduce the characters with some background explanation so that the audience knows why the character or characters are in the current situation. Rising action. This presents the conflict of the play. The conflict is the problem that must be solved. It's the central challenge facing the protagonist or hero. Falling action. The falling action consists of the protagonist moving toward the conclusion or denouement. Conclusion or denouement, the final portion of the play in which the plot comes together and the play concludes. Stage directions. These are the directions for the actors and stage hands. When reading a play, stage directions can act as a narrator. Stage directions describe a scene outside of the dialogue for the actual performance on stage. Not all playwrights use stage directions. Shakespeare, for example, used very little stage directions, thus leaving much of the action of his plays up to the interpretation of the director. Strategies for reading fiction or drama. Number 1. Before you begin reading any literary work, preview or look ahead to see what the title, art, or any other noticeable features tell you about the selection. Number 2. As you read the exposition of the story, visualize or picture in your mind the characters and the setting described. Look for specific adjectives that help you imagine how the opening scene looks. Number 3. Be an active reader by making observations and asking questions about the story. Note whether the person telling the story is a character within the story or someone watching the action from outside. Ask yourself what the central problem or conflict seems to be. Ask why the characters behave as they do. Number 4. The questions you ask yourself about the story can also help you set purposes for your reading. Rephrase each question as a purpose for reading. For example, you might say, I will read to find out why this particular character left home. Number 5. Once you begin to understand the problems the characters face, predict what will happen next. Guess what the characters will do or say in particular situation. Try to predict what will take place in the climax. Number 6. As you read, you will notice that the reasons for certain characters' actions become clear. As they do, your impressions about these characters may change. Continue to clarify or refine your understanding of the story. Reread particular sections of the text to fully understand what has happened and why. Number 7. Any reading experience leaves you with thoughts and feelings. When you finish reading, take a few minutes to reflect on or think about your impressions. Ask yourself how you feel about the story's events. What is your reaction to the main characters? What message about life does the story or play convey to you? Number 8. If you are confused about any of the events in a story or play, review them by answering the following story or play grammar questions. Story grammar questions. Number 1. Where does the story or play take place? Number 2. Who are the main characters? Number 3. What problem or conflict do the main characters try to resolve? Number 5. How do they resolve this problem? Number 5. What happens in the end? How to be an active reader? Reading is like most things in life. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it. You may wonder, however, how one puts anything into reading. Readers get involved in their reading by performing certain mental tasks as they read. They don't just try to understand the words they see on the page. They also connect these words to their own experiences, question what doesn't seem to make sense, and predict what might come next. In these ways, readers become actively involved in the reading process. The following list of skills describes the thought processes of active readers. As you read this list, ask yourself how many of these thought processes you go through when reading. Questioning. When a word, statement, or action is unclear, question it. It may become clear later. Connecting. Make connections with people, places, and things you know. Predicting. Try and figure out what will happen. Clarifying. Watch for answers to questions you had earlier. Evaluating. Respond to what you have read. Draw your own conclusions about characters, actions, and the whole story. Biography of Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens was born on the 7th of February 1812 in Portsmouth, England. His father worked as a clerk but was sent to prison for debt when Charles was very young. In order to make money for his family, Charles went to work at a blacking factory when he was 12. The harsh conditions he experienced there and his life of poverty greatly affected him. He used these experiences later in his life when he took up writing. The concern for justice and the reform society that appears in many of his works also grew out of these experiences. Dickens had very little actual schooling. He mainly taught himself. After teaching himself shorthand, he found a job with a newspaper as parliamentary reporter. He had some success with his sketches, short, often humorous descriptions of events which were published in magazines, but it was the Pickwick Papers, published from 1836 to 1837, that gave him his first real success. This was an immensely popular work, each monthly episode selling more than 40,000 copies. Another important event happened to Dickens in 1836. He married a woman called Catherine Hogarth. The marriage wasn't happy, but the two did have 10 children before their separation in 1858. Two more works quickly followed: the Pickwick Papers, Oliver Twist, and Nicholas Nickleby. Both were published in monthly installments and were extremely popular. Their popularity coming from Dickens' concern for and understanding of the poorer classes and his comic genius. In 1843, one of Dickens' most famous works was published, A Christmas Carol. In this story, it was particularly clear that Dickens was becoming increasingly disappointed with the social philosophy of his time. Much that was bad in society, he believed, was a result of an obsession with money and the social status that came from money. Dickens traveled abroad in the 1840s, first to America and then to Europe. A new stage in his life began. His novels were more serious and more carefully planned. David Copperfield, published 1849-1850, was similar to the story of Dickens' own life. Readers of the novel experienced the same imperfect world that Dickens had experienced as a boy. Dickens also started several weekly magazines in which he published his novels, including A Tale of Two Cities. Dickens first had the idea of a novel set during the French Revolution when he read the book The French Revolution by Thomas Carlyle. The novel was published in Dickens' New Weekly Magazine. All the year round in 1859, it was popular for both its short length and its strong themes. 1859 was a time of great change for Dickens. He separated from his wife. Dickens began a series of public readings of his works in 1858. The hard work involved caused his health to become worse, and on the 9th of June 1870, Dickens died. He was buried in Poets' Corner, Westminster Abbey, London. He had written 15 complete novels and many short works. Through Dickens' work, he knew that a loving heart and a good home can overcome a cruel and unjust world.